Well, Steve, why don't you start talking about your family history in this area and all the Bakers and Prathers and what have you?
Okay,
And,
I'll do that, sir.
I mean, your family goes back a long time.
It does. 6 generations on one side of the family and 5 generations on the other side. So when I tell the history of my family, we call it the tale of 2 cities, because we lived in what now you wouldn't think, we'd probably laugh about it, but we lived in the country. So Acworth was a city, Kennesaw was the city, but we lived right between the 2 of them, out at the crossroads of Hickory Grove and Baker Road. And Baker Road is named after my family. The old home place was right where Baker Elementary School is, and George Stephen Baker Elementary School, that's my Stephen, where Steve comes from. He was my great-great-grandfather there. So they settled there. The Bakers settled on what is now Baker Road, my 3rd great back, so I'm 6 generations. And then that's my dad's mother's side. On my dad's father's side were the Prathers, and they were kind of neighbors, if you would. They lived on Hickory Grove. Their house set right next to what is now, 75 almost took all their property, but the old home place was still there up until probably about, I don't know how long ago, probably about 10 years ago, and that was Papa Prather there. Some 5 generations on that side. But like I said, we felt like, my family felt like they actually lived in the country, and my dad always said that it was an hour mule cart ride to either one. So sometimes they'd go to Kennesaw, sometimes they'd go to Acworth, and then so they've been in there. Some ones have lived in the Kennesaw-Acworth area ever since that time when they started.
And does that go back to the beginning of the county?
Not to the beginning of the county. It was 1862. I believe.
Civil War time?
Yep, right at the Civil War. But we did not have any that we can find. My mom was very much into genealogy. We didn't find any Civil War veterans in our family. I think the age, as far as wars go, it's interesting. As far as wars go, we have been, maybe call you fortunate. The ages fell the way they did. My dad did serve in the Army, but he was not in an active war. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the rest were either too old or too young?
Exactly right. Just missed it. So my grandmother and Baker and grandfather Prather, of course, were married. But my grandmother died when my dad was very young of tuberculosis. At that time, that was not many people survived that there. And so my dad lived with his grandfather in the old home place. And my dad was actually born in the old home place where Baker School is now, and railroad family. So the railroad tracks run right behind the house, and they used to always tell the story that when my dad's uncle would come through on the main line, he'd always slow down right there behind the house, and they would he'd swing his lantern out of the engine, and my grandmother would, as a child, would swing then you had the rope lights in the kitchen, and she would swing the rope light in the kitchen to signal saying hello as he was going by on his way up to Chattanooga. Yeah.
How many generations worked for the railroad?
Would have been 3 generations worth of railroad. My dad retired was a railroad engineer, retired from, of course it was CSX by the time he retired, but it was L&N who was acquired by them, and he started on with SC, the St. Louis and SC&L, running yard trains, and then he ran the main line. And again, as a child, I actually lived in Kennesaw, and we lived in right downtown Kennesaw. So sometimes when the train would stop, my dad would come home for lunch on his way, either up to Chattanooga or back. And one thing that I'll always remember is in 1972, I believe, when, as you do look at the history, there was a pretty big battle for the general engine between Chattanooga and Kennesaw on who possessed it, who had the rightful ownership for it. And as we know, it settled back into Kennesaw. And my dad brought that train home because in 1963 it came under its own power. But when they won the court battle, that the railroad had the decision. That's that he brought it home. He piggybacked it on a mainline train down and stopped in Kennesaw for photographs. So.
Oh, so it wasn't running on its own power?
Nope, not when he brought it home.
Uh-huh.
The last time. That was the last time it came home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so you grew up in Kennesaw, in downtown Kennesaw?
I grew up in downtown Kennesaw, but we spent most of our time in Acworth because you either shopped in, for clothes and things, you either shopped in Acworth or you had to go down to Cobb Center, which seemed like forever, back then. So we did all of our shopping in Acworth, and haircuts because I had, my hair was always cut by Junior Prather's barbershop, which still exists on Hickory Grove Road. It's out there. His son Junior passed away, but his son Tim now is the barber at Prather's barbershop.
How are they related to you?
That's Junior and my dad were second cousins, and my dad still to this day goes over there and gets his hair cut. My dad lives in Acworth now on that, so he gets a haircut, and I'll never forget from a childhood story that my dad and Junior always had this signal. You go in there and the old guys are lined up in the chair, and he'd take me in there. I was 5 or 6 years old, and we go in there, and my dad would say, just give him a buzz cut, Junior, and they'd cut my hair, and I never wanted my hair cut. My dad kept my hair buzz cut time, so he'd go in and said, well, he doesn't want a buzz cut, Junior. He just wants just a regular boy's haircut this time, and Junior would shave my head, and then the next time he'd go in and say, Just give him a regular trim, Junior, and Junior would shave my head. So no matter, I don't know if they were doing hand signals or what, but no matter what he told me, the same thing. Until one day, I cried all the way home with my hair buzzed off. And I got home, my mom grabbed me by the hand, put me in the car. We drove back up to Junior's. She walked in there with all those old gruff men in there, and I cried all the way back up there because I knew what she was going to do. And she had my hand, walked me in there, and told Junior, he better not ever cut my hair that short again. If so, she'd burn this place down. And I guess he didn't because it's still there. It's still there. Yep, Tim's still cutting hair at Prather's barbershop.
Is that right?
Yep.
And you've got a little bit of hair on your head now.
Oh,
That's mine.
okay. That's good.
There we go. So.
And you've got hair on your head now.
And I've got lots of hair on my head now. So now I watch my dad get his head shaved.
Oh, okay. Get it cut real short?
He does. And it's,
Okay. Okay, well, so you go to elementary school in Kennesaw, I guess?
I did. I went to elementary school in Kennesaw, and then went to Autry, and then of course on the North Cobb, and that really where. So my earliest memories of Acworth too were, so when we were kids, you always came to Acworth Beach in the summertime. Either that, or if it was too crowded, we'd go to Red Top Mountain Beach, and I'll never forget. And it's interesting the things you remember, and this is what I remember. So we'd go to the beach, it'd be scorching hot outside, your bathing suit would still be wet, and your hair might still be a little bit wet, but we stopped at the Burger Chief in Acworth to get ice cream. And you would go in there, and the front of it, the building's still there, and the front of it was glass. And so it was enclosed, and they had the air conditioning running. So, and we didn't have air conditioning growing up. So you'd go in there with that wet bathing suit, stand on that cold tile floor, and by the time it was your point, if you got your spot in line, you stepped up, you didn't really want ice cream anymore, right? Because you're freezing to death. So, but I'll never forget how cold that place was. But we stopped there all the time going to the beach. So that was my earliest memories. And then of course the haircuts there. And then when we got into school, got older into school, all of our clothes, we shopped at Eatons and the Five and Dime, and what I remember about that is that because Eatons had the color coordinated for the schools, so Puma suedes, we could get them yellow and gold and black.
Repeat that question one more time. That airplane was just way too loud. It was good stuff. I just want to repeat
Okay.
it one more time.
Just back up and talk a little bit more about that.
Okay. All right. So.
About Eatons and stuff.
Okay, so as we got older and we're in school, we did all of our clothes shopping up at Eatons and the Five and Dime on that. And that's because Eatons had the school colors. They kept the school colors, so you could buy. I remember buying Puma, and when I was at Autry, buying Puma suedes, They were the gold with the black Puma stripe on them, because that matched the Autry Vikings colors, and we did that, and then the Levi, and then my letter jacket, my North Cobb letter jacket, and you bought it at Eatons, and they sewed you brought your letter in, and they sewed the letter on. So we spent time up here, shopping, and then at that time there were other restaurants, and the Chili Dog Inn, I believe, and that drive-in that was just down the road was open. So we spent a good portion of our time up here. And then as you got older, you got in high school, the high school is also, the two cities and right between them. And Friday night after the football games, we went to the Italian Village. The Italian Village was the pizza place that was local here and just down the road. And that's where we hung out after high school. And it was owned by Ralph Coolidge. And again, to tell the two cities, and Ralph Coolidge he was like a second father to me. I spent a lot of time. RJ, his son, and I grew up together, and so he was actually the mayor of Kennesaw first, and then later became the mayor of Acworth. He lived in Acworth. And so he also owned the Italian Village. So I worked there and hung out there on Friday nights, and that was a big part throughout high school. And then as we got older, when I got in college, RJ actually opened an auto shop, and it was they're now torn down, but there were a set of old buildings, about 4 or 5 buildings, 2-story buildings actually, that were right against the railroad tracks on the other side across Main Street. On this side of the tracks, they were across Main Street, and he had a shop in there. So as teenagers during the day, we hung out. The city had kind of, a lot of the shops had closed, and it wasn't as vibrant, back then. So I got to see it kind of at some of its weakest, deadest moments when he was there. He had his shop there, and then of course. And that was throughout college, and then after college, I actually moved away for a couple of years, and when I decided to come back, then I wanted to live in Acworth, in the Acworth community, and of course see it get revitalized and come back, and it's been a fantastic transformation, absolutely has on that.
So. Let's see, 79, you graduated from high school.
That's true.
And what was your letter in?
Soccer.
Soccer?
Yep. I actually played. I was too small to play football. Coach Carden, Roscoe Carden at the time, I weighed probably as a freshman, sophomore. I probably weighed $110. I was 4. I think I was 4'11", not quite even 5 foot. So I grew a lot. I probably grew 3 inches out after I got out of high school. Mm-hmm. So he said, as an endearing term, Coach Carden always called us guys maggots. He said, maggot, you're just too small. You'll get hurt out there. Mm-hmm. And so I continued to play football in the Kennesaw organization, and then was recruited to come up and play for Acworth. So I played my final youth football here in Acworth. I was actually 15, so I would literally practice soccer as a freshman, 15-year-old freshman, after school, and my mom would pick me up, and I would change into my football uniform, driving and be about 10 minutes late for football practice up at the football fields in Acworth right after school. So, yep.
Okay. And then there's a story about how you got to Kennesaw College. I think somebody tricked you into coming to Kennesaw College.
That's right. Talking about Ralph Coolidge, as a matter of fact.
Is that the one?
That's exactly right. So yep. I worked at Grant's Thrift Town from the day I was 14 till the day I graduated college for 10 years. And it was a great experience. And it's funny because people still see me, they recognize me, but they can't think of where, and I'll just say Thrift Town. Oh yeah, Thrift Town. So yes, I was working there, but anyway, and I assumed I'd go to work for the railroad. I mean, that's what my dad did. My mom and dad hadn't been to college, and my mom wanted me to, but I just I just didn't see it. I'd gotten out of high school, and so I was RJ and I were hanging out, and I spent a lot of time at his place, and his dad said, I want RJ to go to school, and he doesn't think he wants to. He said, why don't you both go, and then if you don't like it, once RJ gets settled in, and you don't like it, you can drop out if you don't want to go. I mean, if you're going to work for the railroad or whatever you're going to do, you'll be able to do that. I mean, what's a year? I said, oh, okay. So we signed up, and I hadn't even taken the SAT, so I rushed in, took the SATs. We signed up. Got into Kennesaw. At that point, it was Kennesaw College, is what it was called. It wasn't even Kennesaw State then. And we got in and got going, and I loved it. I loved going. I was still working at Thrifttown, but I was going there was a 640 World Civilization class. So I'd go to school at 6:40 in the morning, and then go to work, and then come at lunch and go to school and back to work anyway. So and RJ dropped out after the first quarter. He said, I don't want to go to school. And I thought, well, I'm here now. And I'll never forget years later when Ralph said, how'd that work out for you? I said, well, you're right. He said, well, I knew if I could ever get you there, I wanted RJ to go, but if I could ever get you there, and I thought that would be something that you might regret later on in life if you didn't at least try it. So, so he tricked me into going to college.
So you were on the 6-year plan, I guess.
I was, that's right. Yep.
We interviewed Gene, he was on the 8-year plan.
Yep.
I think.
As a matter of fact, I would have been on the 8-year plan, but my mom worked civil service at Dobbins, down at Lockheed, and she would continue to work. She was going to work to get me through school, to pay for my college. I said, okay. So I had been in college for about, I was right at about 6 years, and she finally said, when do you graduate? And I said, well, I don't know. She goes, well, how many classes do you have left? I said, well, I haven't looked. I got a few. And she goes, well, what class are you taking now? When I told her I was taking weight training, badminton, art, and something, she goes, do you need those to graduate? And I said, no. And she goes, do you already have enough credits to graduate? I said, yes, I do. She goes, then you need to graduate because I want to stop working. So I stretched that out as long as I could, and then in 1984 I graduated from what at that point was Kennesaw State. Yeah.
Okay. And then you've been doing computer type stuff ever since, I guess.
That's right. That took me to California. Yep. So I'm currently in the business buying and selling computers and whatnot, and that's been a fantastic, been a good entry, been a good, and again, and I got into that, Ralph Coolidge, that's what he at that point, he had some brokerage companies for computers, and RJ, after dropping out of school, and then after my, 6 years of school, and I realized he was making a lot of money for a young guy, and I said, well, that's what I want to do. I was thinking about going to law school, and I thought, I've been going to school a long time. It's time to, start making some money and get out on my own and those things. So Ralph set me up to work for a sister company he was a part owner in, and yep, that was, more than 30 years ago. Still in the computer business.
Then you had to go out to Long Beach, California.
That's right. Well, your memory's sharp. Yep, I did. I didn't know a soul. I had an opportunity. I had somebody in the company I worked for said, if you want to make money, you got to deal in the money. So it's good buying and selling computers, but you need to be on the financing end of it. And that opportunity through a headhunter took me out to Long Beach, California. So I was out there in the lease financing, computer leasing business for 2 years, actually.
And then you came back, and is that when you moved into Acworth itself?
That's right. Yep. I moved into what we call the old neighborhood, and it's called Etowah Cove is I think the plat name of the neighborhood. It's behind. Well, I tell people this now. Everybody doesn't know, but it's behind the old fire station. So there's a fire. It's a fire station there. It's down behind the old fire station. It's also known where Dallas Landing is, and so I. In college, I water skied. So I water skied for KSU in the South Atlantic Conference, and so water skiing was a big part of my life. Yep, it was, and so that was a big part of my life there. And then there was the Atlanta Water Ski Club still to this day has a site on Lake Altoona, and it used to be on Lake Acworth when it first originated. So I wanted to live on the lake. and I wanted to live in downtown Acworth because the memories of downtown Acworth as a kid and as I mentioned earlier were important to me. I mean, that was a big, and Mr. Coolidge, that was a big part of my life. And so I wanted to live in Acworth. I wanted to live on the lake. And so my mom found there was a new section of the old neighborhood. Now, so we say the old neighborhood, that's where Levi Day lived in there, the Deemers also, Miss Day lived in there, a lot of the business owners in that neighborhood. And that
Chevrolet family.
Yep. And so that neighborhood there, but there was a new section of that neighborhood. So it was a brand new house built by one of the former mayors, Mr. Davis, had built a stretch of houses in there, and it was perfect for me. So I moved back and bought that house, and then right after that, I had known my wife for many years, but we started dating. She went to Marietta High School. She's also a local, and so we got married in '91. But we were in that house for 10 years, from '88 to '98, and then we actually in the early '90s we bought the lot across the street because it was still on the lake, and we built another home. So I've been on the same street for 30 years, two different houses, but the same street. And we love being right in downtown Acworth, so 'cause we can walk to downtown.
Yeah. And you got involved pretty quickly in youth sports and all those kinds
That's
of
right,
things.
yep.
Talk about that a little
Coached
bit.
baseball and football in the Acworth Parks and Recreation Development, and then also coached soccer. For my kids were in soccer, so we did that, and that I did that until my youngest was probably 9 or 10, and then she began to focus just on soccer and started into higher levels of soccer. So they have to coach football and baseball.
Now, and there's something also about special needs kids that you were involved with.
Which is very near and dear to me.
Talk about that.
Okay, sure, yeah. So my middle one, Marina, is and she's probably as well known as I feel like I am in the city of Acworth. She's known by at least 3 times more people. Everybody knows Marina. So Marina has special needs, and so it lended an opportunity. And so I joined the Lake Authority, and we're still trying to figure out how long ago it's been. But I've been on the Lake Authority for about 17 years. Marcia Andruzzi kind of brought it back up from the embers when she was mayor.
Probably more than 17 now.
It probably was. It probably is. But as part of that role, being a Lake Authority, the current sports complex is actually on core property. That's the football, or partial of it is football, and the baseball complexes. Before the baseball complex was there, at one time everything was over on the other side of the creek actually that's there. And as a Lake Authority, we were having some discussions, so I went and walked that property on the other side because they were looking to expand on one side of the creek where Pop Willis Field and the football field is now currently. And so I just happened to jump across the creek and started looking at all the land over there. And we were talking about that, and they were looking to expand. So I came back to James Albright, and at the time Doug Allen was a city council member, and said, why aren't we using this side? And they said, well, that's the majority of that is core property. I said, well, as the Lake Authority, and since we leased the property as a state authorized organization, then why can't we make something happen there? So we got to work to be able to develop Acworth Sports Complex, and as part of that, as it's being planned, and me have a special interest in special needs, working, and also Marlon Longacre, a gentleman who's been very active in the Acworth and Kennesaw community. He has a son with special needs, so we come up with a plan to, as they started to design the clover leaves of the field, to make one of the fields a special needs field that's got the rubberized surface and special access on that. The community of Acworth, both the leadership and the businesses and the people came together, and I would say, bar none to this day, the city of Acworth has one of the best special needs programs in general of any any city in this state and probably rivals any in the country. We have a special needs development director, specified for the special populations, including the aging as well as the special needs. But as a result of that, the field was built through private funds and public funds put together, and has been just a fantastic facility and outlet and activity place for all kids, and well. What it did too, Dr. Scott, is it integrated the able-bodied, if you will, with the disabled, so they're in the same park. So if her older brother or younger sister is playing baseball there, then she's also playing baseball there. I'm not going to a separate facility. So it means a lot to me. It does.
How old was James Albright at that time?
I don't know. How old is James Albright right now? Nobody can figure it out. He looks 20, but I know he's not, because he's got kids there. So we don't know. Yeah. No, James was just a little guy. Yeah. Back when I was coming up.
Check, see what year he graduated from Kennesaw. But he's been working for the city for a long time then.
Yeah, we always say when he introduces me to a new employee, I always say, "So, when did you graduate KSU?" And every once in a while somebody say, "Well, I didn't." Well, then how'd you get this job?
Well, talk about the Lake Acworth Authority. Marcia is the one that first appointed you to it. Marcia.
That's correct.
And
yep.
She left office right at the last day of 2001, if I remember correctly.
So I have been there. So I guess over 20 years.
I'm pretty sure Tommy came in right at the beginning of 2002.
Okay.
I'm trying to do my math. What year? This is 19. That doesn't make sense.
It'll be 18 years in.
Yeah, but I thought they were having elections this fall. Must not be for the mayor.
I think his reelection was
2
actually
years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's been in 16, 18 years, seven, doing my math wrong. This would be his 17th year, I guess.
That sounds, about right. So
17th or 18th.
Yeah. Yep, I was, so Acworth Lake was closed to the public.
Yeah. Talk about that.
Okay. Yeah.
Why was it closed?
Because of the fecal counts that they were having, and there's,
In other words, there was a health hazard.
There was a health hazard, and we don't dispute that it was there, but sometimes they were doing some of the measurements right after rainfall. A lot of times, and so they weren't consistent. The charts were not, and the graphs weren't consistent. So,
at any rate, this was like 2001.
Yeah, 2000. Yep, this was 2000, about the 2001 time frame, and so Mayor Andruzzi decided to revive, because it was a state chartered organization. The Acworth Lake Authority was, but it just become defunct. There was not any members. So I was brought in. She and I were talking about it, and she was already in the process of reviving it, and asked if I'd be interested. And of course I was. I mean, because the lake itself and the city and all is very dear to me. And we all had the goal of getting that lake opened back up to the public. I mean, the beach was closed and the sand eroded, and I mean, it just, the beach house was not in I mean, it was in bad shape, and so I joined the Lake Authority, and like I said, right around 2001, and Jack Harris was what I would have called the senior member of the group, and he was the ROTC teacher at North Cobb. So I knew him from North Cobb, and he lived on Lake Acworth. But anyway, so we got it sparked back up. We had some budget that was given to us to do some studies and different things by the city. We got a program put together where to monitor the lake and get better monitors and get regular. There was a gentleman by the name of Paul Rose, who was at KSU in the biology department, so he attended our meetings too. So he was a huge piece of, he started doing the testing himself. He started doing the testing in the creeks before it got into the lake. And he started timing the testing and charting the testing to do consistent time. So it might be after it rained, and it might, after it had been rain for a long time, and they started seeing the pattern, started realizing that a lot of the health hazards were typically runoff from, caused by runoff, and in the shallow areas and some of the non-movement or where the creeks weren't. So long story, not too short, but it's basically once we got the testing patterns down and started getting true accurate tests, we realized that it wasn't nearly as bad. So we didn't, plus, at that time, then you started having more regulation and restrictions, silt fencing and those kind of things. And we realized that the lake wasn't nearly, not only was it not nearly as polluted as first thought, it never had been actually on that. So with that, we got, the city council worked with the EPD and got the blessings to reopen the lake. And then, it's been a long time, but then shortly thereafter, we began to progress. Added sand, opened the beach, and then, and my memory fails me on the timeline because it seems like it's been, I've been there forever. I can't remember even how long I've been on it. But then we started focusing on the beach house. And the city began to put resources on that. And it either was already on the National Register, or if not, we got it on the National Register. And then probably about, I'm going to make a guess, Dr. Scott, but I'm going to say about 7 or 8 years ago, the city put a substantial investment into the bathrooms, and they refurbished the entire building. And what would be the locker rooms or the changing rooms, and redid the bathrooms on those, and have just done a fantastic job refurbishing that area. And now on the weekends, they have to actually stop traffic flow because it fills up. It's probably one of the most popular visited lakes, inland lakes, as part of Altoona in the state for sure. Mm-hmm. And I'm still on it. I'm still there. So yeah, they haven't run me off yet.
And it seems like you told me before about you got rental fees or the leasing of the property.
So the way it works, is, there's a little bit of history there, but at one point, because the city had, and the Lake Authority was not active, the county had discussed with the city, and they took over a portion of the lease. Mm-hmm. So the city of Acworth and the Lake Authority had both sides of the lake, which is known as South Side Shore and the golf course, and Cobble Park on the north side of the lake and the lake. Well, the county took over to build the golf course. The county took over what would be considered the south side, and they actually took over the water. So not the water, but the lake bed. So that was part of the lease. So the only thing the city had at that point was what would be known as Cobble Park, right? But then the county realized that it would, as with anything with service and duplication of services, it would be easier. And with the Lake Authority now proving itself as revitalized and active, they have allowed us long-term to take over, not the golf course, but pretty much everything else of the property around the lake and the lake itself. Now, the way it worked out, because we're state chartered, the Lake Authority is the official lessee, if you will, of the property from the Corps of Engineers, and then we sublease it to the city, which has the lease controlled by the Parks and Recreation. And that includes the sports complex as well, for the baseball and football fields. And that's the arrangement we have. We rent to the city, that we have an annual rental that they pay us each year, and we use that for our operating budget, for some environmental studies and just different master planning and those kind of things that we do that. So we kind of help drive the direction of the lake and the surrounding area.
You told me, I talked to you in 2016 about the Lake Acworth Authority, and you, at that time, I guess they were building the bridge over on Highway 92, and you were talking about building a path all the way around the lake.
Absolutely.
Has that come about?
We're close. So again, through the efforts of the community, we have either via coming out to the sidewalks or via path around the lake. There are now 2 bridges over the coves that on Lake Acworth, and we have paths almost all the way around. What if you recall, what we had discussed was the real sticking point was how do you get over 92? So how do you get over the lake at 92 with that small bridge? What's happened as we progress, because that's become a main thoroughfare from coming out of Paulding County and South Bartow County and getting 75. 92 is going to be redone. It will be a 4-lane, and they're going to put a brand new bridge up. So that it's interesting because nobody wants to touch the old bridge, because then you have the possibility of breaching the dam, and nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to take that responsibility. They're going to abandon the current bridge and spillway and build a brand new bridge. The old bridge will be turned over to the city of Acworth. It will be a pedestrian bridge. There's our link. So now we get across at 92 there, and when 92 comes in, it will be sidewalked on both sides. So that continues the path up to where you get to Ragsdale Road. The only missing link, and you can walk on the side of the road, granted, to walk around the lake, but then from Ragsdale goes to Ragsdale to Acworth due west up to Nance Road, and we'll need that sidewalk. So we're looking for future projects. That's county, so that's not city. So we need to work and coordinate with the county, which the city leaders of Acworth do a fantastic job of coordinate with the county leaders to get in the future to get both of those roads sidewalked. And at that point,
so a SPLOST project for
SPLOST project for that, and at that point, then you could literally get out of your car and walk all the way around the lake.
Wow. How far away are we from having the new bridge?
That's a good question. They're supposed to start construction. They're supposed to start construction at the end of 2018. I think some testing, soil testing, and weather. So it's funded, is my understanding. So I would think we'll see the ground breaking in probably this fall, so 2019. But I've got to imagine that's probably a 2-year project. So before we get to walk across that then pedestrian bridge, I would say we're at least 2 years from that.
Well, at least you have something to look forward to.
Absolutely.
Now, are you still the co-chair of the Lake Acworth Authority?
I am. The official chair of the Lake Authority is designated by the charter is the mayor, but I think because I've been on it so long, that current mayor Alligood leans toward me to support him when he can't be there or to lead the meetings. So I think they gave me the slang title of co-chair.
Okay. And you've been doing that for a long time now.
For a very long. You just reminded me. Yeah, since 2001.
So you've been co-chair ever since.
Yeah. No. Well, I started co-chair with not shortly after mayor, so probably for at least 15 of the 18 years. So 15. Yeah.
Well, what keeps you in Acworth?
Wow. What keeps me in Acworth? Well, 6 generations and 5 generations comes to mind, of course. Yeah. But now. And thank you for asking, because I love this community. It's a part of me as much as I'm a part of it. I've got children that are 7 generations here, and my youngest is off to school, but the other 2 live here in Acworth. And so one of my bucket lists, it might be a strange bucket list, is I wanted to own a piece of Acworth, and I've always love the buildings in here. So about 4 years ago, I bought one of the old historic buildings, which now houses Bricks is the name of the place there. It's a bar and restaurant. It used to be, I knew it as Styles on Main. It was a style shop, and when I moved back. And then that was about 4 years ago. And then something I'm really proud of is it's been a year ago, March of last year, I bought the old Lemon Acworth Bank building.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. And it has a sandwich shop in the front of it, and then it's got a vacant office in the back that I'm doing some work on. But I bought that, and that's interesting because it still has the original flooring is still there. The outline of the teller counter and all is there, and the tin pan roof is still there, and the vault and the safe are still there. The safe can't be removed because they put the safe in first and then built the vault around it. But they got the vault, and the vault door is still in that building. So I was excited to be able to have both of those historic buildings, and so now being a business, not a business owner, but a landlord in businesses, and the kids being here, and and this city's just, there's some great cities in the area, Kennesaw and Woodstock and Smyrna and Bindings, but there's something special about this place. There's 2 major lakes, here. You got the lake life. We have more green space just by default of being Corps of Engineers property and the floodplain property than by far anybody in the region, I would say. And the people here care about this community. The downtown has been revitalized. We now have, in the next 18 months, we've got ground up new buildings coming, restaurants and attractions coming, and I just can't imagine being anywhere else.
And we haven't mentioned in this interview you were president of the Alumni Association.
And there's a Kennesaw University tie. Yes, sir. Yeah, I hold the distinction. I guess I just a creature of habit. I can't. You get me. You can't get rid of me. I hold the distinguishment of the longest serving board member on the Alumni Association because I fulfilled a very long partial term, and then I served the maximum you could serve as a board member, and then tracked up through the executive and became the president of the Alumni Associations. I was on the alumni board for 15 years.
Right.
Yep.
And you were on a presidential search committee.
That's right. Yeah, with Dr. Papp. Yep. When Betty decided to retire and bless her, I was on the search committee for Dr. Papp.
Mm-hmm. So you've been active in lots of ways. What have we not talked about? I know you had some notes that you wrote down.
I think we covered it. You're a good guide. You lead me the right places and get the right stories out of me. I can't think of anything. Oh, I will think of one. So one thing that I had mentioned is because we were 2 cities, the Bakers and Prathers and all split. So I had aunts and uncles on the Baker side who lived right in downtown Kennesaw. That's probably the reason that we moved in downtown Kennesaw is because we shared a place with them but then some of the Bakers obviously we moved into town, as you say, in Acworth, and then the Prathers did the same thing. The another note of distinctions because the Baker name is everywhere with the school and in the cemetery. Well, the Prathers are in the Hickory Grove Cemetery too, on there. But the very first sheriff of Acworth was Marion Prather. So some of the Prathers as they kind of grew up and got out, but on that now it's a distant relationship to him. But the very first sheriff of Acworth, if you look in the history books, was Marion Prather. So Prather was the first sheriff of Acworth. I hadn't decided to get into law enforcement yet. I think Chief Dinner's doing a great job. So,
but you're about as embedded in Acworth as it's possible to be.
I like to think so, and I want to continue to stay embedded in Acworth as long as they have me. I've got obviously friends with the leadership. You mentioned Gene Pugley's. I know him as Eugene Pugley's, but yeah. So Eugene Pugley's, he and I grew up together. He's now one of the aldermen here in town.
You've got the dirt on him.
Yeah, I do. And then of course Mr. Houston, Tim Houston, he graduated with my sister out of North Cobb. So we have 2 North Cobb alumni that they're current aldermen and know both of them very well. So yeah, that's the great thing is that that we don't. I've said this often. We don't don't leave this community, our children come back to live in this community. And I think that's true. My dad lives in my neighborhood, and I wouldn't be surprised if one or two of the kids wind up back in the neighborhood as it turns over. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.